Hi everybody and welcome to the BMS podcast. We all have different perspectives on health, disease and illness that are all shaped by our socio-cultural environment. The aim of this podcast is to raise awareness on different socio-cultural belief systems toward health and promote culturally sensitive approaches in our Western secular environments. Hi everybody and welcome to the BMS podcast, to our very first episode, and we are very happy to have Mr. Jason Exton from Kirksville, Missouri with us. Jason is the director of the Museum of Osteopathic Medicine and a colleague of mine for a long time. I will let him introduce himself and then we'll jump right into the topic of this first podcast. Your turn.
Thank you, Raphael. And we have been colleagues and friends here at the campus for several years, and I'm excited to be here. So I've worked in my job for 22 years, so I know a lot about Dr. Still just because that's what I do every day, and trying to take all those hundreds of thousands of pieces of material we have and consolidate it so you get just what you need. We're accredited, so we're one of the best museums in the nation. That just happened this summer, and we've got websites that will be listed that you can go to learn more about the museum and see things at the Museum of Osteopathic Medicine. You could Google it, and then we also will have our website and the Missouri Digital Heritage, where a lot of these actual documents have been scanned and put for you to look at. So.
Thank you, Jason. So I've been working with Jason and colleagues over the past 4 years on a very specific topic, which is the body-mind-spirit osteopathic tenet, and especially the early history of osteopathy as described by Andrew Taylor Still, and especially with the links he had with the Shawnees, a Native American tribe. And this is a really fascinating material. And as I remember, those materials were really new when you sent them to me. That was 4 years ago. Is that right, Jason?
That's correct, Raphael. Here's the challenge. Dr. Still, it makes it sound like he didn't really write much about the spiritual. So we're supposed to lean towards the material body, the physical, the manual medicine, which is important. But he did write a lot about the spiritual elements. But his family thought that the grandchildren of his children thought it made him sound too way out there, and to protect him. It was a different time when they grew up. To protect him, they gathered all the spiritual statements, everything about that, collected them, and the last grandchild, which was Charlie Jr., his son Charles's son, when he was in his 80s, he took this suitcase of materials and destroyed it. We don't know if he just dropped it in the garbage one day and it was gone. It did exist. People saw it. And he said it made Dr. Still sound strange. And we want to protect him. So I am responsible as the last grandchild to get rid of this stuff. And so we have to dig for spiritual because most of it was just gathered and thrown away by the family.
Yeah, thank you. So the best we can say is that the body-mind-spirit osteopathic tenet is not mainstream in the osteopathic profession, especially in our environment shaped by evidence-based medicine. And a lot of colleagues want to seek recognition, and they have kind of put aside this spiritual component. But what we wanted to do, what we've done with Jason and colleagues and anthropologists in our recent paper, is try to give sense, to give materials to help people understand not just osteopaths, but all other healthcare professionals, and how that could be linked to the health, to physical health. So the purpose of this first podcast is to discuss about the early osteopathy and the links between Still and the Shawnees and the spiritual dimension in healthcare, and try to give more information for practitioners, for patients, because this is kind of easy to understand when we talk to indigenous people, to people who are familiar with traditional medicine. But in a Western healthcare, this is not very common. The spiritual component is used here only in end-of-life care. And this is, while this is a continuing process throughout life in more indigenous, in the indigenous perspective of health. So let's start about what you could say about still interaction with the Shawnees and how this may have influenced the osteopathic principles and practices at this period of time.
Yeah, I think, Raphael, as you're mentioning, it's going to be hard to figure out where he picked these up, these ideas of the triune, the body, mind, spirit, as we call it. But there is no doubt that it was influenced by his experiences being around the Shawnee, that were very spiritual people. Even their language, few words had major concepts. And this is why Dr. Still was always saying that I don't like to use words because they're inaccurate. It's actually the thing as it's happening. And even if osteopathic medicine, often describing technique is not as important as actually doing it and feeling and being there for the technique. But Dr. Still says, if you want to know what osteopathy is, and this is what we're talking about today, is first, there is this material body. Second, there is a spiritual being. But third is a being of mind. And this mind is superior to motion, which he describes as spirit, and the material form. And that it's the duty of the mind to manage this vibration of spirit, this physical body, and how it makes the unique person. And so these are certainly things that are very comfortable in indigenous population and Indian populations and more spiritually cultural groups. This makes perfect sense. So Dr. Still being exposed to this as a young man probably helped influence, but he makes sure that this is osteopathy. And if you're leaving out a piece of this, you're missing the understanding of what it is he's doing. And so Dr. Still did spend time out with the Shawnee Indians. At that time, he was with his father, and it was more of a religious thing. And he was asked, well, do the American Indians have a medicine? And they do have home remedies, things they figured out just by trial and error. But Dr. Still said a lot of what they had to do was singing, maybe some spiritual herb and smoke. He goes, and it wasn't much of what we considered medicine. But here's the strange thing. It worked. People got better. So there's something about this belief system. And we know now that your belief system turns on your immune system. We can't control our immune system. It runs automatically, but we can affect it. If we have optimism, if we have a belief system, we are now able to measure things and see that we turn it on. So maybe the American Indians had something Dr. Still needed, because he talked about the importance of belief in your body, belief you can get well. Because if you don't have this, I don't have a lot of hope for you.
Yes, and this is probably one error we've made when we start to work on this body, mind, spirit, osteopathic tenet, because we've missed the sociocultural context, because it makes different sense from people in the US or in Europe or in people who are religious. So I think what you are outlining is absolutely key. It really depends on personal sociocultural belief system regarding health, disease, and illness. And this is really the topic of this podcast, to try to sort out what could be relevant for contemporary practitioners. And so as I see now, 4 years after working with you and others, it's really related to sociocultural belief system. And in your mind, In the US, for example, if we have people who are not familiar with the healthcare system in North America, is this spiritual component quite common in healthcare? Because, for example, here in France, this is, as I said, it's only end of life care, and it's just more the biomedical dominant system here.
Yeah, and so that's what's sad, because at one time science and spirituality worked very well together, and then we felt that we have to pull them apart into two categories. It's either this or that. And I think Dr. Still saw that you can still have science, but it still can be part of your spirituality, that everything is connected. And I think, when we talk about religion, he said not only did he see this with the Shawnee, but his father, who was a Methodist preacher, it was the same thing. They did not have good medicine in the early 1800s. And yet, praying, coming together, being there for the person would elevate and they would get better. He goes, it was, a miracle, but not when we now understand science says, oh, those two work hand in hand. Belief system, which could be considered spiritual for some people, affects the scientific anatomy portion. So maybe we're bringing these two pieces back together to realize they don't have to be in two separate camps, that, as Dr. Still saw, they work in harmony, or they can be explained with each other, that it's okay.
Yeah, you're right. And one other, I would say, mistake that many colleagues can make is not to take into account the context, the economical context, the medical context in the late 90s in rural Missouri. So obviously we can translate the way A.T. Still was used to treat patients in today's modern world. So, but that's, and I don't have the answer. We're just bringing pieces of information so people can act ethically to, and consider if some people might need more help regarding the spiritual component. Again, as you said, in indigenous people, it's the medicine wheel, it's body, mind, spirit, emotion. It's all connected. And this was really fascinating when I realized that probably the body, mind, spirit osteopathic tenet is rooted with this medicine wheel. I know that A.T. Still had many other influences, and you're probably the best person in the world able to describe those. I'm just emphasizing on the Native American part, because I would say that's the missing part.
Right.
That's something, because it was just an oral transmission. And as you said, that one of his grandchildren just kicked all material out. So sadly, so that's the key, and that's the purpose of this podcast. I would say, how can we integrate those historical component into our modern contemporary world, because now science is much more advanced, medicine is much more advanced, but I think we still need some, well, I would say more contact to something bigger than us.
And so let's look at Dr. Still's religion. Now, here's the thing. Dr. Still was very careful about talking about religion. I mean, his father was Methodist, so people, are you Methodist? Okay. But you're out there with the Shawnee. Are you some kind of shaman? Are you kind of... So Dr. Still was careful because, I mean, he identified the various churches by their leadership. He didn't say Catholicism. He would say the Pope. He wouldn't say, Mormonism, but it would be basically Brigham Young. And so it wouldn't say Muslim. He would say Muhammad. He named religions by their leadership. But people always want to know, but what is your religion? Well, I think if we look at the Shawnee, he might have been greatly influenced there, despite his father being Methodist, which is a Christian, Jesus-based religion. It's one form of religion. Being with the Shawnee believed in the great Father of love, and that you do well and good things happen under the guidance of the great Father of love, and you do bad and bad things should happen to you. It's really a very simple golden rule. And that is actually how Dr. Still described his religion. He finally wrote it down when he was elderly in life. Again, he didn't want people to pigeonhole him and turn people off because of religion. He goes, okay, people want my religion. Bottom line, here it is: love and justice for all, and admire nature. Now, if that doesn't sound like American Indian basic religious beliefs, but that it's very simple. Don't make it hard. It's not all this history and who this, that begot that, and these rules. And it's just love and fairness. And so I do believe that Dr. Still being able to write that down, he actually writes it out. So we have, and then he says, and I want you to admire what we are when we look into the sky and we see the planets and the suns and all the little satellites of things that are all in our universe and galaxies. He goes, they spin, they whirl, they're in perfect harmony, and we are this. And so that is how Dr. Still describes his religion. And it's really something. Some people say, well, where does this come from? We like to think of indigenous populations as childlike, as naive, simple. But actually, Dr. Still's religion is what we all know before we learn language. Children have an understanding of kindness and cruelty. Kids have an understanding before they can speak of equality of division. You give one child a cookie and they're happy, but if you give another child next to them 2 cookies, this fairness, it doesn't make sense, and they can't even express it in words, but they know it's not right. And empathy, if one child is hurt, all the children join in and cry. It is that unity. It's kind of like, as we say, that spiritual with you, belief in you that is there to help you, because we can't do anything else. And then children know that if you do good, good things happen. If you do bad, bad things happen. This is what Bloom's describes as what every child knows before language. And it is exactly what Dr. Still's religion is. And it's the religion of most, basically, indigenous populations. It's what we know before language.
Yeah, so would that be fair to say that he was kind of delivering person-centered care based on their own spiritual beliefs? Because I can imagine, well, it's hard to say today, but would he treat similarly people from different religion beliefs? Do we have any information or materials to that? Because sometimes what can scare colleagues here in Europe is that there's someone that is imposing his own beliefs over someone else, and that's not my understanding of early books from A.T. Still. But maybe you have more information on that.
Well, and I think this is what we're saying. If you basically unequivocally love everybody and you're fair to everybody, it's not really a religion as much a moral compass. It's basically what sets you on your path. And so it is very accepting. Dr. Still would treat, if you're fair to everyone, your background, your religion, your skin color, we start to understand why male, female, why none of these things really ever entered into the picture with Dr. Still, because when he says, I love everyone, I am fair for everyone. If a poor person gets in line for treatment, but a wealthier person is the next in line, Dr. Still wouldn't go past the poor person and treat the wealthier, affluent. And there are examples of this. Very powerful political people would come for treatment. And Dr. Still says the pain of the known and the wealthy is no different pain from the poorest and the unknown person. So you will all get your turn in order. And people actually respected Dr. Still because he lived this idea of love and fairness. And so you got lucky, you got a little money, or maybe you got a title or an opportunity or a position of power. That doesn't mean anything. And this is why Dr. Still himself was a very humble looking person. He had the means to wear new clothes and gold jewelry, but he says, why? It makes no difference. those things. And so we do see that he was really living the philosophy that was probably what he was surrounded by with the Shawnee people, unequivocally being loved and being treated fairly.
Yes, so that if we could translate this attitude in or this concept in our modern world, this is something we've described in some of our papers, the concept of oneness, which is not linked to a specific spirituality or specific religion. It's just the belief of belonging to someone, to something bigger than us. And this is very a secular approach of, at least that's what we've proposed in our work, a very secular approach, because we know this has an impact on the physical health, because people who have this kind of belief, they have less addictive attitude, they get more support because they belong to a community. So I think this is important to know and to incorporate into patient-centered care even today, because this can be a good prognosis factor for pain. And this is what, at least what we've proposed in our work, in order to understand or to try to translate in early A.T. Still's work into our modern world.
Yes, and so you've nailed it there, Raphael. Dr. Still saw himself part of the human community, and the diversity of the human community. You might think of your cells in your body, trillions of living cells, and yet there is one person that is living the life. And so when we think of the human population, we're just part of this human population, but we're all on a spiritual journey. And Dr. Still did believe there was more, that we learn. The whole existence is about learning, that the body's placenta creates this perfect little machine, a baby. And when it's ready, it is delivered, and that is the body. But now we are born into this world, and now it's the placenta of growing the spirit. And so every day is a journey of learning and knowledge to grow your spirit. And so what we're doing in osteopathy is trying to bring each person to the best health so that they can have a longer journey of spirit. We're not going to stop death, Dr. Still said, but we can procrastinate it. We can slow it down. We can give you more time to learn more, and that we all take this with us, that what we learn, nature isn't wasteful. And this might be, again, a very Shawnee kind of attitude, that nature doesn't waste. Humans do. We've got trash cans full of waste, but nature conserves. And if it isn't perfect, it doesn't exist. And so we, by nature of being humans with these minds, are in itself a perfection of nature. And we learn. And Dr. Still says, so what? Now you die and you just throw it away? Nature doesn't work that way. There has to be a purpose. Nature has a reason for us learning, and that reason must be taking that knowledge somewhere upon death. So we come in a spirit, we build a body, and then that body goes through a spiritual journey, and then the body burns up, rots, wears out, and we come in and go out the same way as a spirit, but with this information of this journey. And so it's a very beautiful religion, and I kind of like it and have adapted it myself.
Yeah, again, as you know, I'm French and Peruvian, so as a Peruvian, I can certainly understand that, because this is really part of the indigenous beliefs. But from the Western perspective, this does not make sense. And at least in Europe, in France, the spiritual component is quite tricky, and because it belongs to each person, the private domain, and it does not have anything to do with health or healthcare. There's a clear separation, and so again, we've started this work together 4 years ago. We've connected. I'm not an historian, and I'm not an anthropologist. I'm not a scientist. I'm just a clinician. I'm just trying to pick up some information in order to make sense and to understand. And again, as I see as I read A.T. Still's book, I would say that he was one of the first to promote intercultural healthcare, because he was key in combining Western medical science at this time, and with indigenous basic belief systems such as the body, mind, spirit, emotion. Would you be okay to with this approach of intercultural connections?
I would agree with you, Raphael. And this is what was so difficult for Dr. Still, was that this was not really readily accepted in his time. You're either Christian and you go that way, or you're not part of the group. So this inclusiveness, this openness to diversity of ideas. Dr. Still said the worst thing you can do is an abortion, because you stop the journey of a spirit. Once that baby, is begun, that is going to have the potential of this spiritual journey, and you've stopped this spiritual journey. And that is horrible. He goes, the only thing I can think of as bad as stopping the spiritual journey of a child through slaughter of this would be to kill an idea. That attacking and killing someone's idea is not much different than aborting a child. That's how strong he thought about the freedom of thought and sharing and learning. And he himself says, I would learn from the Pope, or I would learn from the woman scrubbing my floors, but they have information for me. I'm there to listen and learn and be their student. And so we do see how Dr. Still was, about the importance of knowledge. And that's what he felt that we're all going through. We are all gathering in and trying to make ourselves better through knowledge and helping each other in that process.
Yeah, and what you've just said about abortion, that's to be put into context, because as I heard that Missouri just recently changed its law regarding abortion. So again, if we have people from different countries and with different legislation, it's just to help them understand that people might have different beliefs towards health and towards life. When does life starts? When does life ends? So that's different ethical laws, a different ethical context. And again, those are shaped by a socio-cultural belief system. I'm not saying one is wrong and one is right. I'm just trying to explain why people think what they think. And obviously there are a lot of influences from their surroundings.
And so this is good to understand Dr. Still in abortion, because just to say he was against abortion with no context. His context is, it is a spirit on a journey. That was his personal belief. What you do, again, is your journey, your spiritual trip in this life. But he was just sharing, in my view, this is where I have to stand on this procedure as a physician, if someone were to come to me on that. And what's interesting is his granddaughter, we have only discovered this recently. He had a granddaughter who actually at a young age got pregnant. And nobody knew, and she wasn't married, and she vanished on a modeling career and came back and said it wasn't working out. She lives her whole life and passes, only to discover years later, because of DNA and 23andMe, people can find themselves. She had a baby and she did not abort that baby. And the woman came back, and she is part of the Still thing. And so even her son never knew. So mom is gone, and he's alone in the world. And now she has given him a sister because she did not, abort that child. They are now on a spiritual journey together with his sister that he never knew he had. And I think, again, and she never shared that. She went to the grave. Nobody knew except maybe her parents. And what I'm saying, but it did go back to, was the family reflecting on Dr. Still's attitude about this, because the easy answer sometimes seems this just isn't working. And the hard path sometimes is the better learning path. And you don't know how it's going to work out. And what might have seemed like a bad situation has 60 years later become a good situation. So
yeah. And
We
if
don't know the journey.
yeah, and maybe if we could expand a little bit on what you said about inclusiveness by A.T. Still, because if we think back to the late 90s in the US, there was the Civil War with slavery and pro-slavery, the women's rights and for Black people. So, and Indians, again, if we talk here in Europe, if we think about Indians, it's just, the Hollywood movies. But we need to think that even today at the reservation, for example, in Pine Ridge, men, they live up to 47 years. So that's the smallest life. So I can imagine how they were treated at period of A.T. Still. But so just to say that living among the Shawnees is proof of a real inclusiveness. And maybe you can add a couple of things on that aspect of A.T. Still.
Right. And I think so. What I want to explain too is being Shawnee does not necessarily have a genetic component. This is a lot of why our American Indians and natives don't necessarily do the 23andMe. It doesn't make you, in their opinion, it makes you no more or no less Indian. And so the actual tribe that Dr. Still, the Shawnee, Pascal Fish was the chief. And actually, while Dr. Still was first getting there, he gets, it's because of corn not being processed. It's a nice and kind of, and they get black tongue bacteria and they die a horrible death. So the chief of the Shawnee Indian dies, but his son takes over. But his son was a white boy. They don't know where he came from, whether he was found out on the prairie, who knows what. So the chief's son is European white. And he becomes the chief when his father dies, his obviously adopted father. There could not have been a genetically, and he is as much Shawnee and protecting his people as anyone. So I do think we need to also get this idea out there that from an indigenous population, it's not necessarily genetic that makes you who you are. It might be more your belief system and how you are into that. And so I always thought that was interesting, that a lot of people don't realize that after the chief dies, his son, who is European descent, and yet he leads the Shawnee when there's danger and illness because of the white man's disease. Cholera is killing off a lot of the tribe. He takes them away to protect them.
Okay, so thank you for all those information. As you know, in the profession, we have colleagues that are more open to discover other areas, and this includes this spiritual dimension in healthcare, while others want to stick more on what we know to get recognition from the biomedical model. So it's because osteopathy started against the dominant model, and over the years it has become an established profession. In the US, it's a medical profession. In many countries, it's an healthcare profession. In France, it's just protected title, so it's kind of different regulation. And many colleagues fear that the more we get recognition, the more we lose our initial principle or historical principle. What would you recommend to this kind of colleagues who are afraid of using those historical principles because they do not stick clearly with the dominant model? Do we really abandon them, or should we use them in a different ways? And that's many questions at the same time.
That is, and it is quite the challenging thing. If you truly, you can read Dr. Still on very many levels. There's a very simple story level, and then you can go a little dive deeper. And that's the thing, is you can reread what Dr. Still had to say, and each time you may go to a devil level. So if people aren't ready to some degree in their own lives to start understanding their spiritual journey, it makes it difficult. I do think that Dr. Still, he said in Research and Practice, which is my last book, It is the foundation of everything that is osteopathy. And he gives this philosophy about, the placenta of the body and the placenta of the world growing us spiritually. He says all these things. He does talk about manual medicine. We wouldn't know because I told you the family destroyed stuff, but there was a young patient who Dr. Still says, you're going to become a student. He goes, no, he's not. My dad's a preacher. My grandpa's a preacher, and I'm going to be a preacher. But after being treated on the way home, he said, Ernest Tucker said, you know what? I've got to make this the best journey of my life, and it'll be in osteopathy. So he came back as from a patient to a student and then faculty. He spent 17 years. So all this information that we have that Dr. Still has from the Shawnee is because Tucker wrote it down and was his friend for 17 years, more than his own children. Tucker really was curious about the spiritual state, and it is the one piece that survived was an entire book of his 17 years with Dr. Still. And he says, Dr. Still said that he had Indian guides. We would never know this because, again, the family destroyed a lot of this stuff. But because this was outside, Tucker lived to be 90. His son is in his 90s and still alive and had this information to share with us, this day-to-day experience. He would go into a kind of a meditatory state, and basically he would come out of these states and he would then be speaking in the Shawnee language, and then he would translate it back into English. Now, Tucker said Dr. Still loved to play. He was playful, but he goes, I think he was going and getting information somehow, and then he would basically use to translate it to us after he'd come back. But the Shawnee language seemed to make more sense to him. When he's drawing equipment and ideas, he's writing in Shawnee. It might be a broader way of looking at the world that he was using to kind of then come in from 2 points, the Western point and then basically the indigenous spiritual point, and he would then bring them together and present the information. So again, I did want to let people know that when Dr. Still said the first manual medicine I saw was Shawnees tying a leg to a pony to put the hip back into place. It was rough, but I saw this happen. So we cannot negate even the physical elements from the Shawnee, but certainly I believe there were the spiritual, and he talks about these. But I can see where the family said, my gosh, he's talking about Indian guides and he's coming out of trances speaking Shawnee. This makes him look crazy. We're not going to let Dr. Still's legacy be he was an insane man. So in that time period, they destroyed it. Today, we would not think that. I hope.
No, and I think you remember last year when you went with us at the Grand Rex in Paris. We invited Professor Michel Van Elk. He's an expert in psychedelic medicine. And so there's a lot of science now to back what's happening in the brain in those meditative states or altered states of consciousness. So science is recent. And now we shifted from esoteric things, scary things, magic things to science, because if we can measure it, if we can see it on functional MRI, for example, it becomes science. So this is why I'm really interested in those early aspects of osteopathy and all this body, mind, spirit osteopathic tenet, because now we have science to start exploring this the way of the brain is functioning, and the brain is not used same way in indigenous treatment compared to Western treatment. And when you talk about still getting into meditative states, I can interpret that in various ways. But with science now, probably this is something that was related to more indigenous healthcare system. And again, if Western colleagues have never experienced this, I've never seen a ceremony, I've never seen treatments, it's really hard to understand. It's really hard, but the human body is just fascinating. I've seen things incredible when I was in Peru, or when I was in other things. People with pain, with ailments that went well very quickly compared to what they have received when with Western treatments. So the key is to redirect people to the best care, to the care that will suit them better. And again, A.T. Still, it's fascinating to have this double grid of understanding related to A.T. Still book.
And I think, and hitting on it is exactly what Dr. Still, he says things and says things and says things, because I think we're too stupid to hear him. But it's like, osteopathy is first and foremost a belief in your body, that the body can do things. And so we do see this. And so when somebody had basically a really bad fever and typhoid, as we call it, and was going to die, Dr. Still did a very simple treatment to just open up, let the health flow through, the waste flow out, and basically said, but you know what? I get the feeling you're quitting me. And quitting means I'm giving up. And he goes, and I kind of think that if you're giving up, there's not much I can do for you. And so he would ask him, are you quitting? And of course, the patient would be like, no. I said, are you, tell me this, are you quitting me, or are you going to fight this? Because if you can fight it, you are going to be okay. And sure enough, when no one else believed this was possible, this Asa Willard, it's in basically the Lengthening Shadow book, he gets better. He lives to be 93. But at the time, no one even wants to tell Dr. Still the student is sick, because they know he's going to die and they don't want to upset Dr. Still. And when Dr. Still finds out, it's like, my gosh, we can save this kid if we go and help him. But he goes, you've got to believe in your body. You've got to believe you can get well. And we do know now, with all our little scientific devices and chemicals and equipment, we can measure stress. And we know that a stressed person heals not as well. A depressed person is not going to heal. But the optimistic person, the release of healing is incredible. And it's science that when we can actually measure that, oh my gosh, they're believing they can get well and their body is going into overdrive. Osteopathy is first and foremost a belief in your body.
Yeah, I agree. And the believing in the self-healing capacities of the body is one early osteopathic principles, but it belongs to the indigenous traditional medicine. It does not belong to the Western system. That's why we are struggling, at least here in Europe, because we are not physicians like you in the US. We have healthcare profession, and we only provide manipulative treatments and therapeutic alliance in order to, like you just said, to empower people, to get them more active on their pain. So again, I don't have the solution, and that's why we've created this podcast, to get several opinions and to inform people and to see, yes, that belongs to the osteopathic history, all this body, mind, spirit, osteopathic tenet, this self-healing capabilities, the empowering people, just being very inclusive and accepting different belief systems that are not necessarily in belonging to the dominant Western healthcare system. So that's why this man A.T. Still is really fascinating. And I only realized that I lived 2 years. I was probably 200 meters from his grave. So every time I was going to the campus, so I was just in front of his grave, and now I can realize his legacy. I would say his legacy is not to stick word by word to everything what he wrote, but more to understand the underlying principle. And this is what we've discussed today. So thanks again for your time, for being with us. Would you have any last comments for our audience?
Well, I think you brought up a good thing. It's not so much the words of Dr. Still, and he himself said that words miss the mark. They get us close, but they are not what we're about. That it really is understanding the existence there with it, kind of the vibration. And Dr. Still talks a lot about vibration, that there is an energy that connects the whole world and all of us, and we need to open ourselves to that, because we're made, I mean, atoms and things are constantly vibrating throughout our body. The world is vibrating. We see each other because of vibration. We hear each other because of vibration. He says, understand, and one of his best students, if you've never understood Robert Fulford, look up Robert Fulford. It is love, which is actually there. When you really connect with love, there is something like plugging into the wall, that you are suddenly there. And it's this vibration and connection and feeling this and opening yourself to it. Because as Dr. Still says, the words don't do it. You need to exist with your patients within yourself and feel that amazing energy that goes out through the whole world that we're part of, and then use that in a healing nature. So kind of, again, as I would say, not that I don't mind an adjustment in putting my muscle, nerves, and bones back into place when they get out of place at the gym. But if that doesn't come with a caring from my physician that he wants me to be better, it is not a full treatment. And you know when someone is there for you, rooting for you, loving you, and wanting you to do well, and it changes the whole treatment.
Is that correct? That is one of A.T. Still quote, there is only one religion, love, or something like that?
It's basically love and fairness. And then Fulford said,
okay,
you must connect with, you can call it the still point, whatever, but that if you do not have everything out of your mind but love, and he was a student that followed Dr. Still, that is what actually plugs you in to do an even better treatment. And so we don't, Dr. Still wrote it in his own handwriting, my religion, love. And then his students say, you want to do a good treatment? You must truly love. You can't be thinking about dinner and soccer and the kids and my bills to be paid. If you're doing that while you're treating, you're not giving a full treatment. You need to literally plug in, meaning I only care that this person does well. And that is what suddenly will bring you and makes a connection that otherwise, and you'll know it when it's there, and the patient will know when it's there. And so I do believe that, yes, it comes back to, and the Shawnee, it goes back to, it's love. It's love of the great Father and sharing that love. So again, though the word love might make people think, well, what does that mean? Do I have to kiss them? Is that sex? No, love is just this capacity to care. And we know it from the time we're born. Before we even speak words, we know what love is. And we need to give that when we give our treatments. And that's what I think is some of the best people that followed Dr. Still got it and continue to put that out there.
Wow, that's fantastic. Thank you again, Jason, for being our first guest for this BMS podcast. With what we want to do is to raise awareness on different sociocultural health belief system. And again, I think A.T. Still was one pioneer in combining different words in order to promote person-centered care. So thank you again, and have a good day. Bye-bye, Jason. Thank you.
See ya.
Thanks for listening to the BMS podcast. We hope you've enjoyed our chat today. BMS Formation is working to bring more compassion and tolerance between people holding different worldviews in healthcare and beyond. Share it if you like it, and see you soon.